Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 310, cover dated March 1994. So the cover here by John Romita Jr., inked by Dan Green, featuring a dynamic Cyclops and Cable going up against the X-Cutioner, a character who made his debut in 1993's Uncanny X-Men annual number 17. And we're going to see this scene from a different angle inside the comic itself. So let's open this one up to the splash page, and we have Cyclops and Banshee rushing to the danger room because the alarms are going off. And this is a pretty cool drawing by John Romita Jr. and inked by Dan Green. I really like the ink lines on Scott's jacket there. Nice stuff. And then let's turn to the next page, which will be the credits page, title and credits page. And it's one of those ones where I've got to flip it around. Just make sure that you can see the top there and all of that on camera. So this is pretty cool actually, and it picks up from a pivotal scene in X Factor number 68, when Scott had to give his son Nathan Christopher to Uncanny, who would take him 2,000 years into the future in order to cure him of the techno-organic virus that was ravaging his body. And so we've got a replay of Chris Claremont's dialogue from that issue. When he's cured, you'll bring him back? No, she says. The energies required to establish and maintain such a portal are beyond the capability of all save one, and I am she. If you and he embrace this path of destiny, Cyclops, he will be lost to you forever. So Banshee says, even though the speech balloon tail is going towards Scott, it should be the other way around. He says, lad, this is how it happened. And Scott says, tail should be going this way. This is exactly how it happened. Heaven help me. And so the title of this story is Show Me the Way to Go Home. And the creative team is Scott Lobdell, John Romita Jr., pencils, Dan Green inks, with Chris Eliopoulos, Steve Buccellato, Chris Eliopoulos' letters, and Steve Buccellato's colors. So in effect, this is Scott's bachelor party, the evening of his bachelor party. And of course, it won't go smoothly. There has to be an adventure on the eve of his marriage. And this is the disruption of his bachelor party. But we'll find out who's caused this Shi'ar holographic replay of this painful moment in his life shortly. But just before I do that, I find myself often mentioning this comic. It's the X Factor number 68 in question, and I just want to open it up to the relevant scene. It's here. This is Uncanny delivering the same dialogue as in Uncanny X-Men 310, and basically we're seeing the handing over of Nathan Christopher from Cyclops' point of view, and his narrative captions written by Chris Claremont. There's so much I want to say, and I remember the night in Alaska when I told Madeline I was a mutant, and our flight to Bora Bora, and how I felt when she told me about the baby, and later when I held him the first time. The bad times are there too, but they aren't important. It's the joy that sparkles in my mind, and in his as well. He's sad, is my little son, the bravest of us all, but he isn't afraid because he knows this is right, so I let him go. But of course, his son, Nathan Christopher, wouldn't know any of that, and that's all relevant to what happens next in the issue. So Cyclops demands that the computer abort the sequence, but the computer responds sequence termination not within program parameters. So he uses his optic blast to knock the holographic display off one way or the other, and the narrative captions say so. It might have been a bit of overkill, it might have been just as easy to walk across the room and turn it off, but it feels good to lash out. Good, yet hollow. So Scott asked the obvious question, computer, who activated this particular program? That would have been me. So who is it? Is it the X-Cutioner? No, it's Cable. Your prodigal son, Cable says, several centuries removed. And he's come unarmed. And John Romita Jr. always did a pretty cool Cable, and that is a really cool version of him there. And we'll see more great anchor images of Cable throughout this issue. And again, Great collaboration with Dan Green on the inks. I love the way Dan Green's ink brush renders the hatching lines on Cable's trousers here. It's really well done. So Cable says, I realise you people were on your way out the door, but I was hoping you could spare a moment, Cyclops, to talk. And this is a great little bit here, kind of acknowledging the continuity of the fact that Siren, Banshee's daughter, Teresa Cassidy, is a member of X-Force, and Banshee's not too happy about that. He says, after all the corrupting you've done of me daughter in recent weeks, I'll gladly talk to you with me fists, he says. But Scott pulls him off and says, Sean, please go to the party, go on to the party without me. I'll be along as soon as I can. This is personal. And Cable replies concisely, that's one way of putting it. So, naturally enough, we get a scene switch to the party. It's not in Harry's hideaway. Rather, it's a bar in Greenwich Village, and it turns out it's a private party, so they've booked the whole bar. The male X-Men and affiliate X-People groups. So we've got Strong Guy there in the background. He's been invited to the Bachelor party too. And here up front, we've got Iceman, Bishop, we've got Beast, Nightcrawler, and Archangel. And notice how they're not using image inducers. And again, that's because it's a private party. But obviously the bartender is okay with mutants at his establishment. So we get some funny little bits here with Bishop, of course, being the fish out of water 70 years in his past, where Bishop asks the question, pardon me for being dense, but I was hoping one of you could explain something to me. The floor is yours, Bishop, says Beast, and Bishop continues, I'm a little unclear on what this bachelor party thing is all about. As you know, I was raised some 75 years in the future. Oh, I hadn't heard, said the Beast. Well, says Bishop, marriage was discouraged by the XSC, the rationale being one should dedicate one's life to one's work. And Nightcrawler says here, whispers to Archangel, tell me, does he go on like this all the time? Afraid so, says Warren. And Bishop is continuing, and he says, as far as I can tell, the closest correlation to a bachelor party would have been the passing. It is, of course, only an approximation. The two events have as many dissimilarities as they do similarities. So Iceman shuts him up in the future when, so help me if I hear one more word about the future. You don't live in the future, B. You live here and now. Let it go. It's getting tired, dude. So Beast says, what Bobby is saying, Bishop, is there's no future in the past. Even if, in your case, the past is yet to come. Nightcrawler's getting a headache. Warren too. But he thinks he knows where Scott is. Unlikely, though. And that's because we switch back to the X-Mansion and the Danger Room complex underneath the mansion itself. And, surprisingly, while Cable and Cyclops are talking, someone else enters the mansion. Body slides in, teleports in, and that's the X-Cutioner. And he's basically just a regular guy, but he has all kinds of weaponry and gadgets and gizmos and technology that he uses in his vigilante quest to kill those he thinks deserving of being executed. And so we've got this great anchor image here of Cable and Cyclops kind of facing off against each other, gritting teeth. And Cable says to Cyclops, I got the invitation to the wedding. So tell me, what do you have in mind? You were maybe expecting me to carry the rings? I came to say, if you're so eager to make amends for dumping your only son some 2,000 years into the future, you're going to have to start small. Maybe a baseball game, a stroll in the park. And Scott says, I hardly dumped you, Nathan. Letting go of you was the most difficult decision I'd ever made in my life. I was your father, and that meant doing anything in order to save you from the techno-organic virus that was destroying you, anything up to and including losing you to Uncanny, who apparently kept her word. Save it, Dad, says Cable. We both saw the holographic simulation. You made the choice as dispassionately as every other command you've ever given in your life. You're the consummate leader, always going with your first best instinct and never looking back. So Scott is going to prove him wrong. We know from the narrative captions in X Factor 68 that Cable is wrong. So Scott asks the computer to open personal log Summers entry Nathan Christopher. And I like this device of JR's. We see Cable's reflection in Cyclops ruby quartz lenses here. Nice little bit of storytelling. And then we're back in the bar in Manhattan. Another little comic bit here where we've got Gambit going around and feeling out what the X guys feel about Professor X taking Sabretooth into the X Mansion, because it's being hinted that Sabretooth and Gambit have a past and that it doesn't reflect well on Gambit, so he's a little bit nervous. So here he kind of sidles up behind Warren saying, so tell me, Mamie, what you think of the Professor's decision to allow Sabretooth to live at the mansion. And Archangel isn't having any of it. Remy, I don't know what your connection with Creed is all about, and to be frank, I don't particularly care. Everybody makes mistakes, Gambit. A skeleton or two in their closet they're not overtly proud of. Whatever happened in the past, it's obvious Sabretooth living with us during his treatment is making you nervous. You don't like it? Then do something about it. If not, then leave me out of it. I've been at this too long to buy into all this cloak and dagger, divide and conquer nonsense. So Gambit says nothing with the cigarette hanging off his lip, and he goes up to Bobby, who's getting carded at the bar. It's amazing. Little side note here, not being American, being Irish, and not being anywhere near 21 for many, many years. Nevertheless, being asked, I suppose it's flattering in a way, asked for ID going in to some of these bars and clubs in the States by people a couple of decades younger than me. Or maybe it's just they're so legally obliged to be absolutely 100% certain that people are over 21. But anyway, this is amusing stuff to me. But it's an opportunity for Gambit to sidle up with his question. So tell me, mes amis. Now, mes amis means my friends. So I don't think Scott Lobdell really knows his French here. What you think of the Professor's decision to allow Sabretooth to live at the mansion. And this is a bit of an Alan Moore transition where that leads us back to the mansion, Sabretooth's cell, and he's here sniffing, and he sniffs Cyclops scent about 10 feet away from skin metal cable. But who's this? Medlab, ICU. Recognize the dame, but the other. Who's the dame? We'll find out shortly. I like this little lettering piece here, sniff. He's sniffing all the time. What do you know, boys and gals? He says, we got us an uninvited guest. Great anchor image here of Sabretooth by John Romita Jr. and Dan Green. It looks absolutely excellent. Really, really like it. Love this page entirely. So let's continue. We're back in the danger room, and Cable is waiting for Cyclops' point, and then we get a replay of Cyclops and Jean after Nathan Christopher the baby was sent into the future with Uncanny. And he says here, at this point, it was clear that the virus ravaging Nathan Christopher's body would ultimately kill him. He's delivering what's supposed to be a dispassionate report, but he's breaking down. He says it was necessary. I relinquished control over the child in order. He's using this very formal language. Strike that. He says it was at this point I gave up my eye, and he struggles. And Scott asks Jean, God forgive me, he says, don't do this to yourself. You can't blame yourself for what happened. You did what you had to do in order to... But he is absolutely enraged. I'm his father, Jean, he says. When he needed me most, there was nothing I could do to protect him. Every day of my life, I risk everything to save a world full of people who fear and hate us. Yet when it comes to saving my only son, I'm useless. I failed, Nathan. I should have died before I gave him up. I should have died because it hurts too much to go on without him. And he lashes out with his optic blast, and that quiets down Cable in the present. He's got something to think about there. And he finally comes out and says, I wish I could say this makes everything different, better, but I'm sorry, this doesn't change anything. No, says Scott. I don't imagine it would. Interesting layout on these pages. White space here, white space here. It's nice, the symmetry of the layout on the two pages. Nice work by John Romita Jr. Then, great anchor image of Sabretooth popping up, but it's only by holographic projection. And he's warning Cyclops. So this is interesting. You know, Sabretooth, why is he helping the X-Men here? Cyclops just thought you'd want to know you got company. This is news to Cable that Sabretooth's staying at the X-Mansion. And Sabretooth says, better tell it quick, because right now someone's traipsing around our humble abode with enough personal armament strapped to his body to turn this place into a parking lot. Not that I'd even bring it up if I didn't live here and all. So, Cyclops asks Sabretooth, where's the intruder? And Sabretooth doesn't play around. He says, Med Lab, and boys, happy hunting. And here's the X-Cutioner making his way into Med Lab. And with this, we got some sample cards, Fleer sample cards. Which would you rather own? The Mona Lisa, classic and boring, or Beast in his laboratory, classic and cool? I know I'd rather own the Mona Lisa. That's just me. And then we've got a few sample cards here of X Factor. It's pretty nice. Okay, back to the story. Back to the bar in Greenwich Village, and Beast has just told a particularly academic joke that nobody gets and nobody's laughing at, just him himself. And then Banshee arrives, and Banshee makes up a story that Scott's late because he's running a diagnostic check on Cerebro. He said he'll be along shortly and that I'm supposed to buy the next round. And I like this little line from Iceman here. That's our Mr. Responsible. You gotta love him. I remember once when he didn't think anyone was looking, I saw him relax. I find that so funny. Of course, he made me to promise never to tell anyone. And here Banshee's thinking. I like this shot as well, these panels, just with the break here for the moment to moment, with the bartender here in the background. And it looks like Sean is drinking a Guinness. I approve. But he thinks there to himself, now you got me lying to your friends. Wherever you are, Scotty, I hope you're doing the right thing. Well, Cyclops is always renowned for doing the right thing, so we're going to see that. And now I've got to flip this over, get this all on camera. We've got the X-Cutioner here, and who does it turn out is in Medlab, and who's sent that Sabretooth recognised the dame who's sent he recognises the White Queen. So we get a little bit of exposition and X-Cutioner's thoughts on the White Queen and why he's there. She had charge over the Hellions that were killed in Uncanny X-Men 281 by Trevor Fitzroy's Sentinels, and he reckons for the ultimate crime for failing the children, the Hellions, she must pay the ultimate price. So he gets ready to kill her. He says, goodbye, Miss Frost. I will pray for your soul as surely as earnestly as I will pray for my own. But zacked, he's caught with an optic blast. And he knows who it is. Scott Summers, I presume. And Scott says, oops, I don't think you saw that. He knows who it is, Scott Summers, I presume. And Scott says, far be it from me to tell anyone how... No, this is Cable. Far be it from me to tell anyone how to run the X-Men. But when the bad guys start showing up in the middle of the night, carrying on like everyone's on a first name basis, keep it landscape format, I think it's time you seriously consider changing the locks on the front door. I'll take that under advisement, Cable, says Scott as he puts his spectacles back on. And I think there's too much narrative captions on this page. I think Lobdell could have pared it back a bit, but I get what he's going for. How odd it feels to be charging into battle with a son, with your son, old enough to be your father. Yes, odd, but vaguely familiar. A familiarity that comes no doubt through the realization that this is how it should be. So, a nice father-son moment between Cyclops and Cable. And it had been established, I should mention that, established definitely that it was Cable who was Scott's son, who was sent into the future in Cable, a solo series, Volume 1, issue number 8, written by Fabian Nicieza. So that's what Lobdell is picking up on here in this particular issue. So the two guys go up against the X-Cutioner. It's a nice little moment here where Cable picks up this hunk of metal from Medlab and just drops it over the X-Cutioner to knock him to the ground. And Cyclops asks this interesting question. He asks Cable, since when are you this strong? You want the real answer or the flippant one? Responds Cable. Real. You're in luck. It's the same answer. When I have to be, Cyclops, when I have to be. So obviously what he's using here is his TK, his telekinesis, to help him lift that hunk of metal. So Cyclops doesn't know about that just yet. So then we've got Cyclops putting Emma back into bed. She's unconscious, she's in a coma. And of course this is interesting in light of what happens in later X-Men continuity. On the night of his bachelor party, he saves the life of Emma Frost, whom he would become romantically involved with after his marriage with Jean breaks up in the future in Grant Morrison's run in the 21st century. So Cable asks, she died. He asks of Cyclops here. Whoops. He asks, where does he ask it? Scott says, the damage to her body has required constant monitoring. If that's disrupted, Cable follows on. She'd die, I suppose. And isn't this the same woman who tried to kill the X-Men on more than one occasion? X-Cutioner's back up, precisely, more than reason enough to die at the hands of. And the two guys, father and son, respond together, acting as one, and they blast the X-Cutioner right to the ground. But then he body slides away using technology that he's lifted from Cable, and that Cable is keen to check out in the future. And then Cyclops is back tending to Emma again, and Cable says again with this woman, tell me, Scott, why do I get the impression that even if this X-Cutioner guy had stayed, if you were hurt, you'd be looking after him too? And Cyclops responds, and remember, he's the first X-Man officially, so here he is, giving the core of what the X-Men are all about. The day we stop showing compassion for our enemy, Nathan, is the day we become the enemy. And that gives Cable pause here. The day and he thinks, where have I heard that before? And Scott says, I wouldn't know. Look, about what we were saying before, that was before. Fact, my whole life, past, present and future, was before. During most of that time, I resented the thought of you not being the person I imagined you'd be when I was a kid. Turns out you've been that person all along. A person I'm proud to know, and prouder still to be able to call you my father. So quite an emotional climax and denouement to the opening conflict between the pair, resolved here. And really great art on these pages by Romita Jr. and Dan Green too. And then the farewell. Cable says as he gets ready to teleport, for the record, I never hated you. All I ever wanted was to know that you were angry, half as hurt as I was that we were separated at birth. I guess like any other son, I wanted to think you missed me. And Scott responds, I missed you every day of my life, Nathan, and every day of yours. I would have done anything to have been able to help, able to step across time to hold you in my arms, to protect you, to teach you the things a father is supposed to teach his son. And Cable responds interestingly, for what it's worth, there was someone like that, a couple actually, whose names I can't even remember. And though I'll admit I wished it was you, I want you to know I wasn't always alone. And this, of course, was Scott and Jean, the further adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, how they spent their honeymoon, the 3-issue miniseries soon to come out back in 1994. And Scott says, the last thing the Uncanny said to me, do you remember her words? If you and he embrace this path of destiny, he will be lost to you forever. Words written by Chris Claremont. I'm glad she was wrong, says Scott. Look, we could do all this male bonding, drum beating, huggy-feely stuff all night, but I got a life to get back to, and you're late for your only bachelor party. I'm body sliding out of here. Can I drop you somewhere? So he drops him to the bar in Greenwich Village. Like this effect here of the body sliding in, Scott emerging from it. Hey everyone, are we late? And Iceman here, we, oh fearless leader, you didn't art ski on the brewski without us, did you, Scoot? Did I say we? I guess I was wrong. And he looks kind of shaken by that. But we get from the narrative captions, you feel it in your heart before you feel the crumpled paper in your hand. He must have handed it to you during transit. And it's the wedding invitation. And in blue, I'll be there. More than just an acknowledgement that he'll be joining you on your wedding day. It's an affirmation that the day will be fraught with promise of a better life, not only between man and wife, but perhaps between father and son as well. So there you go. What an evening for Scott and Cable, and wonder what the rest of the night was like at the bar, and what kind of beers they were drinking. We'll never know. And here, I told you in the video on Uncanny X-Men 308 that there was a piece of dialogue missing from one of the panels, and here they address it in the letters page to this issue, and they supplied the missing dialogue by Jean. I'm tired of waiting, Scott. The letters here are all about the engagement issue, number 308. So, I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 310. If you did, please like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.